This is Auschwitz, Poland. Seen from above, it looks like a peaceful resort. Lush orchards of apple, pear, peach, and plum trees hang heavy with red fruit, casting cool shadows. No one, unless they had known beforehand, would ever think that this place was once a living hell on earth. This site also marks the military years of one of the most influential officers of the Third Reich, Rudolf Höss. He was known as the SS Chief of Operations, the most loyal servant of the Führer, Adolf Hitler. Take a look at the screen. We are seeing Auschwitz, a network of concentration and extermination camps built by the Nazis in Polish territory during World War II. The largest concentration camp complex covered 40 square kilometers, situated in a secluded valley. Its abundance of trees made it ideal for camouflage. This was likely one of the reasons the Nazis chose this location. It was also a central hub for major railways coming from across Europe, Germany, Italy, Russia, and Finland. This place is inextricably linked to the legacy of one man, Rudolf Höss. If one were to look only at his everyday life, no one would suspect he was a high-ranking Nazi official. Indeed, in the film The Zone of Interest, released by director Jonathan Glazer, the daily life of the Höss family rarely ventured beyond the boundaries of their villa, even while horrific acts of genocide were occurring just on the other side of the wall. By emphasizing the naked truth, the filmmaker revealed the distorted personalities of Rudolf Höss and his wife, Hedwig. Unlike other cinematic works about the Holocaust, The Zone of Interest does not graphically depict the horrors of life and death caused by the Third Reich. Instead, the film relies on the power of suggestion, hinting at the betrayal of humanity through fleeting glimpses of crematorium chimneys and a soundtrack punctuated by gunfire and screams. The story is less about the Third Reich and more about a larger question regarding human nature. Director Glazer stated, "The voice within urges us all. The capacity for violence is something everyone possesses. For me, this is not a film about the past, but one that tries to speak about the present, about us, and the commonality between us and the perpetrators, not our similarity to the victims." The film differs significantly from its source material, the 2014 novel of the same name by author Martin Amis. In the book, a Nazi officer falls in love with the wife of the Auschwitz Commandant, a character modeled after Rudolf Höss but not using his historical name. When adapting the story, the filmmaker removed the love triangle and clarified the connections between the book's characters and their real-life counterparts to immerse the audience in the Höss family's routine and create a surveillance-like environment. Mr. Glazer filmed interior scenes using hidden cameras. The central conflict in the film involves Hedwig's opposition to her husband's promotion. This advancement would take him to Berlin, forcing her to leave her beloved home just outside the Auschwitz camp. At his wife's request, Rudolf Höss convinced his superiors to let his family stay while he moved. The Höss family was only reunited when Rudolf was given a greater responsibility: the deportation and extermination of over 400,000 Hungarian Jews. This all took place in less than 2 months in 1944. Questions about how much the Höss family knew and to what extent they were responsible loom large in the film. Hedwig and her children were not directly involved in managing Auschwitz, but the film shows their complicity in various ways. At one point, Hedwig tries on a luxurious fur coat that belonged to a woman who had been murdered. In another scene, Klaus, the couple's eldest son, uses a flashlight to examine the dentures of Jews killed in the gas chambers. When Rudolf and his children go swimming in the river, he accidentally stumbles upon a human jawbone, a chilling detail that sends him rushing home to wash. So who was Rudolf Höss really? What kind of organization was the SS, and what were his secrets? First, let us go back to October 5, 1921. The Nazi Party founded the paramilitary SA, or the Storm Detachment. Because they wore brown uniforms, they were known as the Brown Shirts. The leader of the Nazi Party, Hitler, also served as the supreme and most powerful leader of the SA. Their primary mission initially was to protect Nazi meetings, disrupt the meetings of opponents, and suppress those perceived to be against Hitler. The SA was initially under the command of Captain Hermann Göring in 1923. Direct operations were handled by the Chief of Staff, the most famous of whom was Ernst. However, after the SA became a rowdy and undisciplined force, Hitler officially established the SS, or Schutzstaffel, to gain more reliable support. He transferred his close associates from the SA and supplemented them with those formerly trained in Nazi ideology. SS soldiers wore black uniforms similar to the Italian fascist militia and were thus called black shirts. The SS had a rank system similar to the German army, but with different titles and unique uniforms. Every soldier who joined the SS had to swear an oath of absolute loyalty to Hitler personally. Initially, this force served only as bodyguards for the Führer, and it wasn't until 1929 that Hitler found the ideal leader for the SS, Heinrich Himmler. When Himmler took over as commander, the SS had about 200 members. This force grew rapidly over time, eventually dominating Germany and becoming a name that inspired terror across every region of Europe occupied by Berlin. By 1930, the combined strength of the SA and SS reached over 100,000 men, outnumbering the German army of the time, which was restricted by the Treaty of Versailles on July 26, 1934, as a reward for their efforts in the bloody purge of June 30th, the Night of the Long Knives. The SS was made independent of the SA, still under Himmler's command. Soon, with stricter discipline and greater loyalty than the SA, the SS became far more powerful. This was partly due to Himmler's significant power within the Third Reich, reporting only to Hitler rather than any minister or general. A professional military force equipped with heavy firepower and vehicles, known as the Waffen-SS, was developed as a second army alongside the regular military. It gathered fanatics thoroughly trained in Nazi ideology. Ultimately, this force consisted of 38 combat divisions with a strength of 800,000 to 950,000 men. That was the SS. But who was Rudolf Höss? Born into a devout Catholic family in a German spa town on November 25, 1901, Höss was baptized as an infant. He had the opportunity to attend church throughout his youth, and priests were frequent guests in the Höss household. His father took him to Lourdes and many other churches in Europe. Rudolf went to confession regularly, and his father hoped that one day his son would become a priest. But a childhood experience left him with a deep distrust of priests, eventually leading him to leave the church. Father John J. Hughes, a historian, stated in a 1998 lecture that Rudolf had once been punished with 2 hours of detention. Following his usual conscience, he mentioned his infraction during his weekly confession. However, he did not report the incident to his family, not wanting to spoil my parents' Sunday, as he later wrote. Father Hughes continued, that evening, Rudolf's confessor, a good friend of his father, visited the family. The next morning, Rudolf's father scolded and punished him for not reporting the matter immediately. Since the family's phone was broken, no other guests had visited, and none of his classmates lived in their neighborhood. Rudolf concluded that the priest must have broken the seal of the confessional. Höss wrote, my faith in the holy promise of the priesthood was shattered, and doubts began to rise within me. After this incident, he could no longer trust any priest. He changed his confessor, and shortly thereafter stopped going to confession entirely. Instead of continuing toward the priesthood, Höss joined the army and served in World War I. He had a brief stint serving in a military hospital. Then, at the age of 14, he was accepted into a regiment in which his father and grandfather had previously served, the German 21st Regiment. By age 15, he was fighting alongside the 6th Ottoman Army Corps in Baghdad, Kut el Amara, and Palestine. While stationed in Turkey, he was promoted to sergeant at only 17, becoming the youngest non-commissioned officer in the army to be promoted from the regular ranks. During that time, Höss was wounded 3 times and survived malaria. He was awarded the Gallipoli Star, the Iron Cross First and Second Class, and several other honors. Höss also briefly commanded a cavalry unit. In 1922, he joined the Nazi Party after hearing a stirring speech by Hitler in Munich. After joining the organization, Himmler, the leader of the SS, invited Höss to join his ranks. Höss revered Himmler and treated everything he said as a directive. Höss developed and built the ideals of a Third Reich by serving at various concentration camps. Between 1934 and 1940, Rudolf worked at the Dachau and Sachsenhausen concentration camps. At one time, these places primarily held political prisoners. Having made a strong impression on his superiors, they appointed him as the commandant of the newly established Auschwitz camp. In this role, Rudolf turned Auschwitz into Nazi Germany's primary killing center, while adopting Zyklon B as the most effective method of using poison gas. Höss later admitted that using gas was preferred over mass shootings because the latter placed a massive psychological burden on the SS soldiers responsible for the executions, especially since women and children were among the victims. Rudolf always approached the prospect of mass death with precision and systematic organization. In 2020, in the book History Extra, historian Lawrence Rees wrote, "Rudolf Höss was not just a robot blindly following orders, but an innovator in the organization of genocide." At the height of Auschwitz, the camp's gas chambers were capable of killing 2,000 people every hour, while the Höss family lived in a villa within the camp's zone of interest. A Polish man who once worked as a gardener for the Höss family testified after the war. They had everything in their house, lacking for nothing, as they had a huge supply of goods accumulated from the Auschwitz camp. Furthermore, the couple also exhibited deep anti-Semitism. According to this witness, Höss's wife, Hedwig, believed that the Jews must disappear from the earth, and that eventually it would be the turn of the Jews in England. Historian Rees wrote, "Rudolf joined the SS with full faith in the grand vision of Nazi Germany." In the film, Rudolf was transferred to Berlin, late 1943, to take up the post of inspector of all concentration camps. The SS commandant was satisfied with his progress, describing himself as a true pioneer in the field with new ideas and educational methods. In May 1944, Rudolf returned to Auschwitz to oversee Operation Höss, aimed at bringing 440,000 Hungarian Jews to the camp in just 56 days. The Auschwitz album, a collection of photographs kept at Yad Vashem in Israel, captured the images of individuals as they arrived at the death camp, where most were immediately taken to the gas chambers. These photos stand in stark contrast to the snapshots seized from SS officer Karl Hocker at the time. In those photos, Rudolf Höss, Josef Mengele, and other SS officers stationed at Auschwitz are seen singing, relaxing, and participating in formal ceremonies at the camp. Intertwined with the final moments of the newly arrived Jews was the leisure of the SS officers. It is a sentiment both ruthless and strangely understandable. It reminds the audience of the film The Zone of Interest about the hypocritical humanity of the Nazis. So, with all his war crimes, what was the fate of this family after the war ended? When the war concluded, the Höss family hid in northern Germany, hoping for an opportunity to escape to South America, where many Third Reich officers sought to settle after the war. Hedwig and the children lived in an old sugar factory in a coastal village, while Rudolf moved to Flensburg and worked on a farm under the alias Franz Lang. It took authorities a full year to catch him. Rudolf's daughter, Brigitte, recalled, "My older brother Klaus and my mother were taken away. British soldiers beat him severely, and when my mother heard her son's agonizing screams of pain from the next room, like any other mother, she was determined to protect her child. So, she revealed where my father was." The man in charge of the hunt was Hans Alexander. He was a German Jew who had fled Berlin in the 1930s for England. One night, when Hans Alexander arrived at Rudolf's door, Rudolf denied being the former commandant, but a wedding ring engraved with the names Rudolf and Hedwig exposed his lie. After being captured, Rudolf testified at the Nuremberg trials, providing detailed information about the killing machine and his own role in executing crimes at Auschwitz. Rudolf was the first senior Nazi member to admit to such crimes, taking responsibility for his actions, while many others refused to acknowledge their wrongdoing. Transferred to Poland, Rudolf was tried for murder and sentenced to death. While awaiting execution, Rudolf wrote his autobiography, admitting to being a cog in the wheel of the Great Destruction machine created by the Third Reich. On April 16, 1947, Rudolf Höss was hanged at Auschwitz before a massive crowd of former prisoners. After Rudolf's execution, his family struggled to make a living in a country trying to forget its past. As the widow of a convicted war criminal, Hedwig received no pension or funding from the government. She also had no job. This led Höss's grandson to speculate that his grandmother survived thanks to money provided by the old Nazi network. Eventually, the eldest son, Klaus, moved to Australia, while the daughter initially moved to Spain and later to the United States. This family rarely spoke about Rudolf, attempting to hide their ties to the Nazis and downplaying the crimes of the deceased. Hans Alexander's nephew is a journalist named Thomas Harding, who interviewed Höss's daughter while writing a book about his uncle's hunt for Rudolf. In 2013, the Globe and Mail quoted Harding about his interview with Höss's daughter. She told him that her father, Rudolf, was the best father in the world. He often read stories and took the children boating. The whole family loved him. There were two sides to Rudolf, the father and the Commandant. What Harding discovered is that a person can be both a human being and a monster at the same time. That is truly terrifying. It could happen again. That is why we must remain vigilant.